Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, everyone. We are starting a new chapter today, Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter number 14, verse number 1. Shri Bhagavano Uvacha Param Bhuyah Pravakshyami Jnananam Jnanam Uttamam Yaknatva Munayah Sarve Param Siddhim Ito Gataha. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Again, I shall declare to you this supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained the supreme perfection." Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmanitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So finally, we have reached chapter number 14, which is entitled The Modes of Material Nature. Now, many times you would have heard me talk about these modes, which is goodness, passion, and ignorance. But today we learn about the fourth mode also, which is pure goodness. So from this verse that we just recited, Krishna is giving us knowledge by which we can attain supreme perfection. Not just perfection, but supreme perfection. Now, to connect chapter 13 with chapter 14, there is a verse in 13 that connects it, and that's verse number 22, in which we learned where Krishna says that the living entities, that is us in material nature, follows ways of life, enjoying the three modes of material nature. This is due to association with material nature, and thus the living entity meets with good and evil amongst various species. So from that we understood we are the cause of our own enjoyments and suffering. So like it is said, as you sow, so shall you reap. So based on our actions, we either enjoy or we suffer. And in chapter 13, we learned, that the living entities, that is us, the spirit souls, we are different from the material nature, but still we get entangled. In other words, we get trapped in the body. The soul is embodied, it's in the body, it is trapped inside the body. So now in this chapter 14, we will learn how the living entity, that is us, we are limited and we are controlled. So it's like we are in the body, the soul is in the body, but it is kind of, it is shackled, it's bound up by the modes of material nature. But fortunately, towards the end of the chapter, we will see Krishna will explain how to become free from the modes of material nature. Now, this first verse that we recited, Krishna is saying that he is going to give knowledge that can help one attain supreme perfection. So here, in fact, the whole chapter is about the different modes, like different things that happens in modes. For instance, the food that we eat, the association we have, the actions we perform, the sacrifices we perform, all these, they fall into different modes. So basically, we are actually, what you can say, we are operating in one of these three modes. So Prabhupada says that sometimes we are, there is a competition between these modes. So sometimes we are, you can say, we are working in the mode of passion and ignorance. Sometimes it is goodness and passion. And sometimes it is, you can say, goodness and ignorance. So there is a competition going on between these three modes, and our actions, that is what, determines whether we receive supreme perfection or we don't receive supreme, or we don't attain supreme perfection. Now, this whole chapter is to enlighten us. Krishna is giving this knowledge so that we become enlightened and get disentangled from these modes, which means we get free from these modes, so that we work in such a way that these modes do not affect us. Us means we living entities. So how to become free from these three modes of material nature? Krishna is going to teach us towards the end that we need to transcend these three modes, which means we should not be in ignorance, passion, or goodness, but we should go beyond, which is pure goodness. Now, this verse that we recited, chapter 14, verse 1, Krishna is saying, with the help of this knowledge that Krishna is again repeating. If you remember, he uses the word again to Arjuna, that again, I'm giving you this knowledge. He said that with this knowledge, great sages, they achieved supreme perfection. So in other words, supreme perfection means we become qualified to go back to the spiritual world where we belong, where we came from. So the goal of this whole chapter is to teach us how to attain supreme perfection. Now, those of us who, operate or we work under the influence of these modes of material nature, we can see that there are certain tendencies, and those tendencies are like criticizing others, getting angry, gossiping, being envious of others, all these unwanted things which are there in the heart. So that means these modes of material nature, when we operate in those modes, then these are the byproducts. So Krishna tells Arjuna that if we take on this knowledge and put it into practice, then what will happen? We will attain the transcendental nature like Krishna's. We will not become Krishna. We will not become the Supreme Lord, but we will receive the transcendental nature like Krishna's, which means there will be no coming back into this material world. That means we break the cycle of birth and death. But important point to remember, Krishna says, is that even though we may attain supreme perfection, go to the spiritual world, our individuality will remain. We will not merge into the Supreme Lord, or we will not merge into the effulgence of the Supreme Lord. We will still remain individual living entity, which means individual spirit soul. So the question may arise, okay, we've gone to the spiritual world, then what? What do we do over there? What are the activities? What to expect? Just like, if my family says, let us go to this country, X country or whatever. And I'm like, okay, let's go. But what to expect over there? What kind of people, what kind of food, what kind of weather, all these questions, need to be answered, what to expect. So similarly, when we go to the spiritual world, what do we expect? So Srila Prabhupada explains very nicely that Jivera Swarup hoy Krishnera Nityadas, that the constitutional position of Jiva, the spirit soul, is eternal servant of Krishna. So if we are eternal servants, then obviously we would serve. So when we go to the spiritual world, we will perform devotional service. We will serve Krishna over there, but we will still remain individual spirit souls. We will not merge. Now, what happens? The material knowledge that we gain, which is also necessary, because until and unless we get material knowledge, we will not be able to, succeed in material life. We won't be able to get a job. How will we pay our bills? How will we maintain our body and soul together? So material knowledge, academic knowledge is necessary, but what happens? That material knowledge, Prabhupada says, it gets contaminated with the modes of material nature. But spiritual knowledge, like the Bhagavad Gita, it does not. So To be able to qualify to go to the spiritual world, one needs a spiritual body. A spiritual body which is Sat Chit Anand, which is eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss, just like Krishna has a transcendental body. So this spirit soul, which is in this material body, needs to accept a spiritual body, and that is possible after liberation, because in the spiritual worlds, it's the spiritual body that is allowed over there. And in that spiritual body, the living entity serves the Supreme Lord, because there is no more contamination of modes of material nature. Now, further in this chapter, Krishna talks again about his position, that he is the cause of all causes. In Brahma Samhita, there's a beautiful verse which says, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam, that Krishna is the cause of all causes. He is the original father of all living entities. And it is only Krishna that makes it possible. How? Srila Prabhupada explains in his purport that, there is a Sanskrit word called Mahat Tattva. What does that Mahat Tattva mean? It is the total cause of total cosmic manifestation. And in that total cosmic manifestation, modes of material nature are also included. So the question may arise, how do all these universes appear? Very nicely, Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport of verse number 3, he says, when Krishna impregnates this total substance, he just glances over material nature and he impregnates them, the material nature, with seeds of living entities. So into the material nature, the spiritual nature is mixed by the will of Krishna. And after that, all living entities are born of this material nature. Now, one should not think that the living entities are born from material nature. No, it is because Krishna, he is the one who gives the seeds. He's the seed-giving father. Srila Prabhupada gives a very nice example how to understand this. Now, you must have heard about scorpions. So what do scorpions do? They lay the eggs in piles of rice. There's a pile of rice and they lay their eggs. And then after some time, the scorpion is born out of the rice. Now, one may think that rice is the cause of the scorpion. No, the scorpions laid the eggs in the pile of rice, and from that pile of rice, gradually the scorpion is born. But rice is not the cause of the birth of scorpion. Similarly, material nature is not the cause of the birth of the living entities. It is Krishna. He is the seed-giving father. So that is important to understand, that the seed is given by Krishna, and it may only appear that we are products of the material nature, but we are not. So every living entity, like we already heard in chapter 3 and 5, every living entity gets a particular kind of body based on past actions. So whatever actions we have performed in the past, based on that, we get a particular type of body in a particular family, in a particular country, with particular features, or whatever it may be. So we are the cause of getting this body that we have right now, and we will be the cause of getting our next body as well, based on our actions. So based on that, we will either enjoy or we suffer, or both of them. Then Krishna in verse number 4, he says that he is the seed-giving father of all living entities. All means it is human beings, animals, aquatics, trees, everybody, all living entities. He is the original father of all species of life. And these living entities, they are in every planet, right from Brahmaloka, the highest material planet, right? From Brahmaloka down, all the way down in all the different planets, there are so many living entities. Now, in the scriptures, it is said that there are 8.4 million species of life, not the population, but differently types of different species of living entities. And this material nature is considered the mother, while Krishna is the supreme father that gives birth to all the living entities. And he says, I am the source of birth of all living entities. In fact, there is a very nice verse in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, Sarva Yonishu Kanteya Aham Bija Pradhapita, that I am the seed-giving father. Now that we are talking so much about living entities and material nature, so Krishna continues with material nature, and he says that this material nature, it consists of three modes, and that is goodness, passion, and ignorance. So when we living entities, we come in contact with these modes, then we become conditioned. Then we start operating in those modes. So the living entities, we spirit soul, we act under the spell of the modes of material nature. Now, why is Krishna talking so much about these modes? So that we can understand how and why we get conditioned, how and why we get entangled. And then he gives the process by which we can free ourselves. So we may see that despite our desire to enjoy independently, still we get restricted. We get, because we are subject to the control of the modes of material nature. Now, we do have what you call is minute independence. In other words, let me give you an example. Say, in my backyard, there is a fence, it's a nice garden, but there is a fence. So I tell my son, you are welcome to play in the backyard. Now, he has the freedom to do what he wants in the backyard, but it is limited because it is fenced, which means he cannot go outside the fence, right? So he is restricted just in that fenced area. So he has that minute independence. Now, what happens? We living entities, when we have this minute independence, most of us misuse it. In other words, most people, most human beings do not value this rare human form of life. They don't value that this is a body that we have received, which is very rare, which can help us to become self-realized, which can help us to attain supreme perfection. So if the living entity, starts working under these three modes, and then, there is confusion, because sometimes we may see, we must have experienced ourselves also, that sometimes we are really good. That means we are operating in the mode of goodness. Sometimes we operate in passion, where, it's like a go-getter thing. I got to, I have to, that passion is there. And sometimes we are in the mode of ignorance, where we don't want to do anything. We're lazy. We just want to lay around. We don't want to do anything. We don't want to think anything, So we keep operating in these different modes of material nature. But Krishna says, if we want to attain supreme perfection, then we need to transcend even the mode of goodness. Like there is a saying in English, it's not good to be good, and it's not good enough to be good. That means it's not sufficient to just be good. We got to go to the mode of pure goodness. Only then, when we transcend these three modes and go to pure goodness, then we become qualified to attain the supreme perfection. Now, I will give you a summary of verses 6 through 18, which kind of give general characteristics of these different modes. So we'll talk about 4 modes: ignorance, passion, goodness, and pure goodness. So let's see, Krishna is from verse 6 onwards, he says, those who are in the mode of pure goodness, they have knowledge, they are pure, they are happy, they are free from sinful reactions, they perform devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, those who are in the mode of goodness, they are relatively pure, not fully. They are illuminated. They are conducive to getting real knowledge, which means they are open to getting real knowledge. They are kind of happy, and they are also free from sinful reactions. But those who are in the mode of passion, they have unlimited and uncontrollable desires. Their endeavors are very intense. They are very, very, go-getters kind of people. There is greed in them. They are in bondage conditioned. They are attached to the fruits of their actions. Now, what about those in the mode of ignorance? They are considered foolish, mad, inertia, indolence, sleep, laziness. These are all the characteristics of those in the mode of ignorance. So now that we know these are the characteristics, so the next question should be, what is the destination of such people, in all these different modes? So Krishna says, those who are in the mode of pure goodness, they reach the eternal abode of Krishna, which is the spiritual world. Now, those who are in the mode of goodness, they reach only the higher planets, like, but the higher planets, like, which is called heaven. So those higher planets are also material planets, which means after enjoying the fruits of the actions, then a person comes back into the material world, which means it's not the spiritual planet. Now, those who are in the mode of passion, they come back to this earth, this earthly planet, and they continue their fruitive work. What is fruitive work? I perform this action, I'm going to get the fruits of this action, and I'm going to enjoy those fruits. Now, Krishna says, those who are in the mode of ignorance, their destination is hellish planets or animal life. They, become an animal in the next life. Now, what about those, the knowledge, how do you see about knowledge? So Krishna says, those who are in the mode of goodness, in them real knowledge develops. In passion, greed develops. They become more and more greedy. And those who are in the mode of ignorance, they, become more foolish, more mad, and go more into illusion. Then he continues to say, this chapter is very interesting. It gives so much knowledge. Towards the end, maybe in 2 weeks' time, I'll give the whole summary of all these different modes of material nature, just to summarize this whole chapter. It's a very, very important chapter. Now, the next question arises, what about objects of worship? So Krishna says that those who are in the mode of pure goodness, they worship him, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Those who are in the mode of goodness, they worship the demigods. Those who are in the mode of passion, they worship demons or powerful men or self-proclaimed gods. And those who are in the mode of ignorance, they worship ghosts and spirits. Now, a very important topic, which all of us would really like to learn, is food. Even the food falls into these different categories. Now, what is the result of, those who eat food in the mode of pure goodness? It frees them from sinful reactions and future contamination, and it invokes Krishna consciousness. And that food in the mode of pure goodness is called Krishna Prasadam. It is a food that is it's a food that is actually in the mode of goodness, but it is offered to Krishna. And once it's offered to Krishna, it transcends to the mode of pure goodness. And that's why it's called Krishna Prasadam. And it has no sinful reactions at all. Now, food in the mode of goodness, Krishna explains, it increases longevity, it purifies the existence, it gives strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. It's nourishing, it's sweet, it's juicy, it's fattening, It's palatable. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives examples of these different kinds of food in the mode of goodness. And he says it's like milk products, grains, fruits, vegetables, sugar, all this falls in the mode of goodness. What about food in the mode of passion? Now, I already mentioned, for the food to be in the mode of pure goodness, it has to be offered to Krishna. And Krishna only accepts food which is in the mode of goodness, not in passion or ignorance, only food in the mode of goodness. Now, when we go to chapter number 17, we will get more detailed information or knowledge about, different categories of food in these different modes of material nature. So what about food in the mode of passion? Krishna says that food which is too bitter, it is too sour, too salty, pungent, dry, hot, it causes pain, distress, and disease. All these foods are in the mode of passion. And I can give you an example from the purport where, like onion and garlic, these are pungent foods which also, causes, it's hot for the body, it causes pain in the stomach, it's kind of bitter also, and it is sour also. So this is some example. Now, what about food in the mode of ignorance? It is tasteless, it is stale, putrid, decomposed, unclean. Its examples are remnants like meat, fish, eggs. All this non-vegetarian food is considered in the mode of ignorance. Then Krishna goes on to explain action. So those who are in the mode of pure goodness, their actions are solely for the satisfaction of Guru and Krishna, which means those who are in the mode of pure goodness, their actions are based on the scriptures. Whatever the Bhagavad Gita is explaining, they follow those instructions given in the Bhagavad Gita, and based on that, they perform their actions. And so what is the result? There is no reaction, neither good nor bad. It's reactionless, no reactions at all. But those who are in the mode of goodness, they perform actions based on scriptural injunctions as a matter of duty. There's no attachment. They renounce the fruits of their activities, and gradually they become purified, which is a very good thing. But what about those in the mode of passion? Krishna says when they perform their actions, they do it under false ego. And they put in a great effort, and they want to satisfy their desires. They want to enjoy the fruits of their actions. And in the end, that results in misery. And in ignorance, those who perform actions in the mode of ignorance, Krishna says they are irresponsible, they are violent, they are distressing to others, they are in illusion, they do not take instructions from the scriptures. So what happens? They only get bound. There is bondage, there's no liberation, and then there is suffering. So Krishna is saying that if one understands how these modes are working, then Krishna says one can understand him. Then one is able to transcend the modes. Now see, until and unless we have the knowledge about these modes, how they operate and how they bound us and how they can liberate us, we cannot transcend them. So we need to have knowledge about these modes. And once we transcend these three modes and go to pure goodness, then Krishna says one attains the same nature as Krishna. That doesn't mean that one becomes Krishna, but yes, go ahead, Rashik. Do you have a question?
So
go ahead.
I just wanted to know if Krishna, if he has a guna. I just wanted to know that.
If Krishna has what?
Krishna has a mode of nature. If he
has... No, Krishna is in the transcendental mode. He is the Supreme Lord. He's in the transcendental mode. But we living entities, because we are on this earthly planet and we are encaged in this material body, So that's why we get influenced by these modes of material nature. So whatever, it depends on our association, with whom we associate, what kind of food we eat, what kind of actions we perform. So all these things, they add up together, and then we start operating in these different modes. But if we take on this knowledge, like Krishna says, then we can understand, we can try and contemplate on our actions. What am I doing? Am I, working in goodness, or am I in passion or ignorance? Now, it may become difficult to do self-evaluation. So it would be good to take advice from someone who is experienced, or someone who has knowledge about the Bhagavad Gita, who has studied the Bhagavad Gita, and then try and understand in which mode do I operate. So Krishna is saying that if we take on this bona fide knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita as it is by Srila Prabhupada, then we will learn, we will get the guidance from the book itself, from the Bhagavad Gita itself. It'll guide us, just like we have been studying from chapter 1 onwards, and now we've reached chapter number 14, and we have learned so many things. Like we've learned about Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, so all different ladders, the rungs of the ladder of yoga. We've learned all this. So to first of all understand that I am a spirit soul, I am not this body, and to understand that the senses that we have in this body, they are also material, but the spirit soul within the body is spiritual, because it's part of the Supreme Lord. And so when we take on this knowledge, then we understand what is it that is entrapping us, what is it that can disentangle myself. So with the help of this knowledge from the Bhagavad Gita, we can understand the operating of these modes, and then we can come to a stage where we become fully conscious, right? Not partially, but fully conscious of Krishna, which means then we have reached the stage of pure goodness. So first step is to observe how these modes are working on us, then understand how these modes are active. It is not us, we are not active. It's the modes that are making us active. It's not the spirit soul, it's the body that performs all these actions. So if we try to, not just theoretically understand, I am not this body, I'm the spirit soul, but really contemplate on it and try to be conscious of this fact that I am a spirit soul, I am eternal, like we learned in chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, that we living entities, we are eternal. We can never be cut by any weapon. We cannot be withered by the wind. We cannot be moistened by water. We cannot be drowned. Nothing can happen to us. Why? Because we are eternal spirit soul. And then Krishna says the next step is to understand that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, today's last verse that I'm taking, number 20, which I'll again repeat next class, is Krishna is talking about the result of transcending these modes. What is the result? Just like anything we do in this life, we want to know what is the benefit, what's in it for me, how am I going to benefit from this, or how is it going to be useful to me. So the result of transcending these modes of ignorance, passion, and goodness, which means coming to the stage of pure goodness, then we'll become free from the cycle of birth and death. Then Krishna says we'll attain permanent happiness even in this life, which means permanent happiness means happiness which has no beginning and it has no end. And then that also means we become free from the modes of material nature, which means we become free from distress. And then at that stage, while in this body, in this material world, we will enjoy life in spiritual platform. You see, the life is the same, but the consciousness has changed. So Bhagavad Gita is just teaching us how to purify our consciousness. We still do the same actions like taking care of family, going to work, or doing business, or whatever it may be. We are still performing our actions, but the consciousness has completely changed. So this is how Krishna explains one can attain supreme perfection. So is it possible? Definitely it's possible, but it needs practice. So there are two things Prabhupada says. One is knowledge, and then when we put it into practice, it turns into wisdom. Knowledge plus application equals to wisdom. So now that we have taken knowledge, then we need to put it into practice. And I'm sure you all know what is the first step of this practice. You know, I talk about this all the time. The very first step is mantra meditation, where we chant the holy names of the Lord so that we can purify our heart, we can purify our senses, we can purify our intelligence. You see, so when we do this mantra meditation on a daily basis, then we start seeing the difference. Then we can also see how gradually we are able to transcend these three modes of material nature. So as like in every class, after every class, I chant for a few minutes. So I will do that again today also. And in the meantime, I will post some, I don't know if there is anyone coming for the first time. So I have some links here. And at the bottom, you will see is the mantra that we can chant. So I would humbly request that you also please chant along with me this Maha Mantra just for a few minutes. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So I chanted just 10 times, but if we chant 108 times, it takes about 10 minutes. So please chant on a daily basis and you will really see the difference it makes, you know, how it makes one so happy and peaceful. And, you know, it also changes the consciousness. So that's all for today. And I'm going to end the class now. And just before I end, I just wanted you all to know that since next week I'll be traveling, so there will be no class next week, but we will meet week after next. So I'll end now. If anyone has any questions,